The Last of Us as an IP is in a really interesting place right now. On one hand, the original The Last of Us Part 1 is still beloved among many. Many still consider it to be a masterpiece. But then The Last of Us Part 2 came out, and that certainly created a rift among the Last of Us fan base and community. While it's clear that the game, in terms of its construction, was a labor of love with just how incredible the graphics, the music, the presentation, the attention to detail, the performances, etc. are, the story remains very, very controversial to this day. But then the Last of Us HBO show came out, and that was overall really well received. Many people think it's one of the best, if not the best, live-action video game adaptations out there. But then the Last of Us Part 1 PC came out, and that was really rough. That was just a really bad port with tons of performance issues and bugs that plagued it and just kind of ruined its launch. So yeah, Naughty Dog has been having some ups and downs with the Last of Us IP. And the next stage of the Last of Us is this multiplayer mode. A lot of people miss factions from the original game, and this new multiplayer mode that is a standalone experience. It's supposed to be this much more expansive version of the multiplayer we saw in Factions. This was announced 11 months ago, back in June 9th, 2022, during Summer Game Fest 2022, when Neil Druckmann took the stage to show this concept art of this multiplayer mode, and GameSpot describes it as Naughty Dog unveiled a brand new standalone title based on the multiplayer in The Last of Us. They showed off concept art from the game and say it's bigger than any single-player game they've ever done. This definitely feels like much more than just a multiplayer mode attached to a single-player experience. This feels like a full-fledged sort of live service version. The plans surrounding it definitely sounded very ambitious, but this is a project that may be in trouble, and this is all based on reporting by Jason Schreier, investigative reporter who published his story on Bloomberg. But before we get to that, let's take a look at this statement that Naughty Dog released on May 26, 2023 that reads, "The Last of Us fans, we know many of you have been looking forward to hearing more about our The Last of Us multiplayer game. We're incredibly proud of the job our studio has done thus far, but as development has continued, we've realized what is best for the game is to give it more time. Our team will continue to work on the project as well as our other games in development, including a brand new single-player experience. We look forward to sharing more soon." So at a glance, this just looks like a statement that says we need more time to make this multiplayer Last of Us experience the best it can be, and that's something that people are going to be on board with, given how many broken releases we have had over the years in the AAA landscape. The basic response has been take all the time you need. But what this statement actually is seems to be a response to Jason Schreier's reporting that this project might not be going so hot, that it might be in a little bit of trouble, or that it might have been stalled. So here's Jason Schreier's reporting on that front, starting with this tweet that he posted on May 26th that reads, "Naughty Dog has significantly scaled down the team on its Last of Us multiplayer project, sources say, as it reassesses the game. Following Bloomberg's request for comment, the company put out a Twitter statement today saying the game was delayed." That timing is no coincidence. That statement they put out there to get ahead of Jason Schreier's article so they can inform their community and their audience and their fans before Jason Schreier could put out the story to try to mitigate some of the worries that the development of this project is not going as well as people would like. In Naughty Dog's statement, all they say is we need more time and we're still working on it, but they don't mention the fact that the team behind this new standalone multiplayer mode has been scaled down, according to Jason Schreier's reporting, which might indicate that the project is just losing steam, or at the very least, a lot of things are reevaluated. And so we might not see this project for quite some time at best. Honestly, it looks like Naughty Dog might have jumped the gun a bit by announcing The Last of Us multiplayer so early. That's just unfortunately a bad habit of the games industry. They just announce stuff before they should. Now, before we delve further into Jason Schreier's article on all of this, speaking of bad habits, you know who will help you break bad habits? The sponsor of today's video, Fume. That tastes really good. This is an innovative award-nominated device that takes all of the bad out of bad habits involving inhalation of unhealthy chemicals and retains the fun actions of the habit alongside delicious, naturally flavored air. There are no vapors involved here, just breathe in and taste a wonderfully refreshing scent. I got 3 flavors with me here, and the one I tried was white cranberry, which genuinely smells and tastes amazing. The second I opened the package, I immediately got a whiff of what I can best describe as a zesty, slightly minty, almost tea-like smell that took me by surprise in the best way and filled the room. Inserting the flavored core into the device was super quick and simple, and once I took a hit, the aroma immediately filled my mouth and nose in the most pleasant way. There was no coughing, no irritation. It's just air that smelled and tasted really freaking good and really freaking fresh. The device itself feels very premium with its combination of high quality wood and metal with magnets holding them together, and the metal part itself rotates to adjust the amount of airflow, and it's also a great way for fidgeters to keep their fingers busy. Switching from bad habits to fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun, which is why over 100,000 customers have made the change with thousands of success stories, and there's no reason you can't be one of them. If breaking destructive habits is up your alley, you can pick up the Journey Pack today by heading to tryfume.com/yongyeah or scanning the QR code and use the code YONGYEAH to get 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com and use the code YONGYEAH to save an additional 10% off on your order today. Going back to Jason Schreier's reporting on all of this, here is the Bloomberg article whose headline reads, Last of Us multiplayer video game faces setbacks at Sony. Weaknesses were found in the game, even as the HBO series became a hit. It reads right here that Sony has slowed down development on an upcoming multiplayer game in its long-running Last of Us video game series as the creators reassess its quality and long-term viability, according to 4 people familiar with the project. It's worth noting that Sony has recently been making a major push towards making more live service games. They still want to keep making the story-driven, campaign-driven single-player titles, but they want to accompany all of that with long-term, monetizable live service games, which is why during the PlayStation Showcase, so many of their first-party announcements were live services. As this GameDeveloper.com article highlights, 4 live services were introduced at the PlayStation Showcase. They are Marathon from Bungie, Helldivers 2, Fair Games, and Concord. A stark contrast to the one first-party single-player game that was present at PlayStation Showcase 2023, Marvel Spider-Man 2. This right here is the trailer for Fair Games, which can be best described as Sony and PlayStation's take on something like Payday, a cooperative heist experience. All they showed was a CGI trailer, and you can see how well that went. This was very poorly received. The CGI trailer offers very little information. It's not representative of actual gameplay. And with any corporation that pushes this hard for live services, there's bound to be trepidation from the masses who have been burned so many times by live services. And then right here we have the trailer for Concord, and this CGI trailer offers even less context. All we know is that there is space and ships and guns involved, but it's all just a CGI trailer that's completely useless. And so this trailer right here also wasn't particularly well received. The video's description does offer some information, a new PvP multiplayer first-person shooter from Firewalk Studios launching on PlayStation 5 and PC. Then we have the trailer for Helldivers 2. Now, Helldivers is niche but beloved among those who did enjoy the first game, and so its return is something that people have received positively. And this trailer right here, on top of it being fun and funny, it actually did show gameplay, and so we know what it's going to look like. And yeah, people seem to have received this one positively. They seem more excited about this one. Last but not least, we have Marathon from Bungie, which is now owned by Sony and PlayStation. Now, Marathon is not, in fact, a PlayStation 5/PC exclusive. It is also coming to Xbox. Marathon, for those who don't know, was this first-person shooter that came before Halo. This is pre-Halo Bungie we're talking about. They're reviving this franchise, but it is going to be a live service, which people feel a little mixed about, which is why there's some negativity to the likes to dislikes ratio. But generally, people were impressed by the trailer. It is CGI, but it's got some cool imagery and aesthetics and music going on. Super trippy stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see how all of this turns out. We can see right here that Sony's push for live service is kicking into full gear. And I have very little doubt that The Last of Us multiplayer mode was going to be wrapped around in Sony's live service plans. And so Sony is prioritizing making sure that these games are engaging for the long term and monetizable. But it seemed as though Sony's recent evaluation of the development progress of this Last of Us multiplayer project, it just wasn't good enough, and so the team working on the game was scaled back. Now a small group remains on the project while the company reevaluates the direction of this game. It's not been canceled, but many of its developers have been moved to other projects. That is not a good sign for a project like this. It feels like enthusiasm surrounding it is kind of dying off. Though maybe the reevaluation of this project is going to take long enough that they want Naughty Dog to move on to other things and then come back to this project. Maybe that's what it is. But Either way, it doesn't sound like the development of this project is going smoothly. It doesn't sound like it's anywhere close to launching. In fact, it looks like they're going to have to overhaul aspects of it if this project got such a poor evaluation from the higher-ups that they decided to reevaluate the project's direction and to move developers to other projects. Now, while the standalone Last of Us multiplayer game was only announced last year, the game has actually been in development for at least 4 years, according to this report. It started as a complementary mode to The Last of Us Part 2, but then ideas and ambitions surrounding it grew, and so the creators decided to make it its own game, except the game in its current state is not meeting Sony standards, and also it didn't meet Bungie standards, seemingly. One of the reasons that Sony bought Bungie was for them to offer aid in developing live service games, which is why Sony asked Bungie to evaluate the Last of Us multiplayer project and its ability to keep players engaged for a long period of time, which is what led to the reassessment. Seemingly, Bungie looked at the project and said, actually, we need to rethink some stuff. Now, I have to wonder, does the evaluation that the Last of Us standalone multiplayer game received that prompted the project to be reassessed, that prompted developers to be moved to other projects, have more to do with the fact that the quality didn't live up to Sony and Bungie standards, or the live service elements, the monetization, the loot, and these things didn't live up to Sony's desires to monetize this game? Does that make sense? Does the revaluation of this project have more to do with how good and how fun this game was to play, or more to do with, is it monetizable enough? Is it long-term engaging enough? Does it have to do more with the nefarious elements of live service? Was Sony's evaluation something along the lines of, no, this game is too generous to the players. We have to squeeze them more. We have to slow down the progression more. We have to give it more loot, more things for players to grind for. We have to make the gameplay loop more addicting, the monetization more enticing by tweaking the progression system so that they are more insufferable, grindier. Like, are we talking about that kind of evaluation, or was it genuinely, this game is just not fun to play right now and it's not going to keep players hooked, so we got to make it better, genuinely better? The emphasis in this article seems to be that Bungie was concerned about the game's ability to keep players engaged for a long period of time. This is what seems to have led to the reassessment of this game, and that concerns me very deeply. The primary goal of live services is to keep people engaged for as long as possible. It's to keep people hooked for years and years that they recurrently spend on this game, which is why live services tend to be so grindy, why they tend to be so insufferable, why monetization systems tend to alleviate some of that insufferableness. It's starting to feel like the issue that Sony and Bungie had with The Last of Us multiplayer was that it wasn't live servicey enough. They want Naughty Dog to double down on live service elements, and I have to wonder if that won't result in the degradation of the game's quality. Maybe this original vision was just a neater, tighter experience that was just the right progression rate, that was just the right length, and now it's being extended and drawn out for it to be a much longer term live service through gameplay loops and rewards loops and progression loops that will be extended in a way that might make the game suffer in its fun factor. Now, this is just me spitballing here. This is just me speculating. This is just me worrying. I hope that what I'm theorizing here is not what's actually happening. I hope this evaluation really has more to do with the fact that The Last of Us multiplayer game in its current state just isn't fun to play, and they're trying to find ways to make it fun to play. And ideally, if they can keep that fun factor for the long term for players to keep coming back to this game, then that's a great thing. I hope it's more to do with that. I think my optimism or my pessimism for The Last of Us multiplayer standalone game will largely depend on how Sony's other live services are handled when they come out. When those launch, what's the quality like? How grindy is it? How aggressive is the monetization? Can they create a balanced live service experience, or are they going to try to milk players' wallets dry in aggressive, cynical, egregious fashion? How those other live services turn out will greatly inform Sony and PlayStation's goals with live services and how far they're willing to push certain things, which may very well inform how The Last of Us multiplayer mode will turn out as a live service in terms of its monetization systems and its grind and its progression and rewards loops, and whether we can expect that to be egregious or not. And only time will tell, but right here, right now, my fear is that the concerns that Sony and Bungie have is that the live service elements of The Last of Us multiplayer standalone game aren't egregious enough rather than aren't fun enough. And I sincerely hope that's not the case. I hope this is more a case of Naughty Dog just not having all that much experience making live service games and Bungie genuinely stepping in to make a game that is just more fun over the long term rather than diminishing a vision or making compromises just for the sake of live servicifying this further, for the sake of long-term engagement that may be shoehorned in there at the expense of the overall fun factor of the experience. Maybe I'm being paranoid, but it doesn't hurt to be paranoid in this AAA landscape that has burned us so many times. So these are just the thought processes that are going on in my brain that I hope is just paranoia and not reality. Whatever the case, a development like this will certainly create a sense of foreboding surrounding this project that is not giving off great vibes if these behind-the-scenes developments that Jason Schreier is reporting are true. Scrolling down the comment section of Jason Schreier's tweet, you can see that people are upset or worried by this development. Moving developers away from this project 4 years into development certainly makes it feel like it's being abandoned in some way, or that the project, just its original ambitious vision, won't be fully realized. People are just kind of expecting the worst from this. Others are wondering whether The Last of Us needs to go full live service with their multiplayer component instead of just doing a better version, a more expansive version of factions. People are saying, I appreciate what they've done, but this isn't something I look for in their ecosystem of games. Who knows, maybe Naughty Dog will prove skepticisms wrong if the project does end up launching at some point. But for now, there's just a lot of apprehension surrounding this project's ability to deliver, a lot of confusion as to what's going on, how things could turn out this way for this project 4 years into development, reevaluating the project, moving developers away from it. Like, none of this bodes well for a project of its ambition and its scale and of its pedigree. Or at the very least, that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Bloomberg's report that The Last of Us multiplayer standalone game project is facing setbacks, that it's been stalled, that evaluations surrounding it from Sony and Bungie were not positive. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.